Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm talking with Ebenezer Ikonne. We talked about patriarchy, football, and being a worst case scenario kind of person.
I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello, hello everyone, and hello with me I have Eb. That's how I should pronounce your name?
Yeah, short for Ebenezer. Yes.
Ebenezer. And before we jump into the questions, I want to show. I always like to show a little bit on where we are. So I'm in Ghent in Belgium, and we're moving to Mableton in the United States, if I'm correct.
Yep. In
Um,
Georgia.
yeah, and so what's the time on your side? It's here. It's about 5:30 in the evening. What's the time on your side?
It's 11:30 in the morning.
So we're traveling distances, we're traveling time zones and everything. And in the morning, that means it's Tuesday morning. Is that correct?
That is right. Good
So
question.
I'm
Need to clarify that. Yes.
so I'm calling from the future. So yeah.
You- yes, you are.
And well, yeah, let's not go too much into that. But these days, I sometimes feel that Europe is ahead of the US. That said, maybe the US is yeah, I don't know.
It
Back
depends on who you talk to, doesn't it?
uh, it you are where Europe was in the 1930s, I would say sometimes in
Well,
or
this is about
sometimes in the
agility and not about the
exactly. So
evolution of
let's
civilization. So maybe we'll have
exactly.
a different conversation for that sometime.
Oh, that's a completely different conversation. Now, before we jump into all the questions about agile and everything, what do you want people to know about you for the few people that might not know you yet?
I think a lot of people don't know me, but thank you. So, what is there to know about me? Uh, I am really just passionate about the workplace. I have several interests in life, but in the context of this conversation, my passion is for how we can create workplaces where people thrive and flourish and achieve the goals of the organization. So for me, it's a two-pronged way of thinking about it. Organizations exist to get things done, but
Hmm.
they're also a place where we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort and energy. And so I'm very intrigued and interested in things we can do to increase our individual and collective development. So that's in a nutshell about me. It's the things I talk about and focus on. Of course, I'm a big Arsenal fan. Go Gunners. Professionally, I'm married. I have 3 kids, and maybe that's it to
Wait,
get
did you
into.
say I'm professionally married? That sounded like something strange.
I think I'm more than professionally married, but
All right.
but I am married.
Okay, so sorry for the joke. And well, when you say about work, I think one of the things where I know you from is from the podcast Joy at Work. So
Yeah,
you really bring it's not just it, and of course it is a passion. It is about results, but at the same time. For what it is for me, and that's a little bit what I heard as well with you, is that it's also about getting the results in a way that we still enjoy ourselves, right?
yes,
We spend at least, or for most people, we spend at least 8 hours a day on the job, so we might just as well enjoy the time that we're doing there.
yeah,
And for some of us, well, I know at some point that this is now more than 10 years ago, but at some point I was working very closely with a colleague, and I had said at that time that I was spending like 6 hours talking to that person. And that was way more than I spent at that time with my partner. Like 6 hours a day talking to a person is
yes,
very
yeah,
long time. So
yeah.
yeah.
It
So
is. It is a very long time, and this is why many of us, or at least some of us, end up developing like really deep friendships in the workplace simply because of
mhm,
how much time we spend with people there. So a lot to talk about, a lot that's
mhm.
interesting in that space.
Exactly. And so and that doesn't mean that there is sorry, I have something in my throat, but that doesn't mean that it's not about results. We can still get the results, but might just as well be but with friends and with people that we like to have around us.
I think
So
so. I think so, yeah.
well, let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah. There are many things. One is I grew up on a university campus, so that meant I was around people who questioned a lot, and so I just I guess grew up with this questioning, not taking things without really testing and having to go through some critical thinking. That was what it was like living with my parents. I also, when I thought about this question, I also thought about I grew up with a lot of females in my environment. I was thinking a lot about that. And I think that helped me to maybe listen more, I think, because
Mhm.
as a guy in the room, a lot of times,
And wait,
I,
because you very quickly switch from one to the other. Do I also hear that there were a lot more women at university with you, or was that two separate things that you
oh
said
yeah,
now?
that's two separate things. So university is one thing that influenced me. Just that environment of learning, that environment of questioning, of challenging, of not just putting claims out there without critical thought, because you could say something and very quickly somebody would ask you, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what's the evidence for that? So that caused me to question quite a bit, I think. I think that was what shaped me. And then thanks for pausing me there. And then I just think not necessarily a university thing, but just my environment in high school and the community where I lived. End up growing up with a lot more women, girls my age range, and so being a guy in that situation, you just they have to find a way to fit in. Many of them are
Mm,
good friends till now. I still stay in touch with, but there were certain things. Probably, I think that if my I had friends that were males, but I think if I had had a prevalence of male friends, maybe there are other things I would have picked up. So I think these are things that have just influenced me in my outlook. I think it's also made me very much. I grew up in Nigeria, and it's a society that, at least at the time I was growing up, and many people will still say that it is today, was very big in patriarchy, male dominant and things like that. So growing up with a lot of females really, I think, put me in a place where I was advocating for them quite a bit, always making the case that they deserved a fair shot, even as the males in the society did. And I think that that's followed me throughout my career in the different things I've done. So
So,
those
so,
have been some interesting influences.
so when you talk about having these female people, these women around you when you grew up, that was still in Nigeria, where there was a lot of patriarchy and where, let's say, the rest of the society didn't give them that much attention, or maybe negative attention. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, or maybe even the attention that was given was not the same as was given to males in society.
Right.
So, patriarchal systems where things pass from fathers to their sons and things like that. At the risk of getting in trouble with people who would watch this, some might argue that women occupy like a second class position in society in
Mm,
many situations. And when you're the only guy and you have a front row seat to that, I don't know what caused it, but maybe again it was being in an environment where everything was criticized. You begin to ask questions like, why is
mm.
it so? Why can only a guy be the president of X of this club? Why can't a girl? So I think that that's it. And society has moved along since this, where we're talking 30, 40 years ago at this point, but still, these are the sort of influences and things you see that I think stick with you, that shape you uh,
Mhm.
unconsciously. You only recognize it later on in life as you reflect.
Yeah, and then you might see the consequences that maybe other people might not see because of
Yeah.
having seen that very Yeah, and maybe even experience it, because I can imagine that if some of these things happen to close friends of you where you don't understand that, yeah, and then you have a conversation with them, and basically nobody understands, or we do understand, but we understand that it's basically for the wrong reasons that they're held back. I can definitely see how that can influence you. Um, and then you move to university, where you learn a lot more about critical thinking. You said before that you learned about listening. Does that also mean that when you're at university and people yeah, are critical about your thinking and questioning things, that you're much more, or that you're, I don't know, much more, because it's hard of course to see for yourself, but that you're rather receptive and open to these kind of questions to learn?
Yeah. So I would say early on, it's all about winning the argument. So if who has the better argument? So just being honest, I don't know that the motivation was to learn as much as it was to demonstrate intellectual superiority in those environments. And over the course of my life, I've realized why winning is not always, is very rarely the wrong objective to have. But I can say at the time I was in university, it was about winning. But the thing it led to was that it made you do the work because you didn't want to lose these intellectual debates. You had to know the information. You had to make sure that you really tested your ideas, got input from other people, so that when you made your arguments, you would be the winner at the end of the day. And if you lost, okay, you take the learning from that situation. But I would not be honest if I said like the primary motivation in that situation was to learn. It has become my primary motivation now, but in the earlier days it was more about winning and being
Hmm.
right.
And but being right, so winning with the arguments, still based on yeah, intellectual correctness, I would say, not
Yeah,
just winning because you were in charge, or winning because you had the
sure,
power. It was
sure.
winning because you came up with the best idea. That's what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
yeah.
Or
It
or
is
the
true,
best
but when you
argument.
want to,
Is it the best argument or the best idea? Because that still might be a little bit different.
yeah, so the best argument versus the best idea. So the best argument would be the an argument that the premises make sense, the conclusions are valid. Like you unpack it and the information is there. It's based on empirical evidence or whatever the case may be. So these intellectual arguments were really, when they were stress tests, which ones stood up to scrutiny and which ones did not stand up to scrutiny. But the danger, if I can come back to what we're talking about winning, when you're really focused on winning, then you subject yourself to things like confirmation bias. You only look for information that supports your argument. It's very hard in many
Mm.
cases to hear the other person's opinion as well. And even if you bring third party, fourth parties into the mix, because something is at stake for you, whether it's your identity or whatever, that openness to even accept that there might be gaps in your thinking, or your thinking's correct but maybe it's not, what you've said is necessary may not be sufficient. So being open to receiving is sort of the danger of the winning approach. It's kind of the flaw with public debates, quite honestly, because public debates are often about winning,
Mhm.
and people go in to prove that they're right. And I'm not suggesting like everything is subjective. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is when you're so focused on winning the argument with good information, by the way, you potentially close off avenues to learning more and just being richer in your view of the world.
Right, I can, but I also hear a link between the two stories, about because you grew up in that environment with a lot of female friends, like you said earlier on, you were much more open to listening, and yeah, the whole thing about the discussions, the more you listen, the better you are at making correct arguments about the other person, and not just because a lot of people, what I think many of us see is that sometimes people are watching for the clue to respond, but not so much understanding the other person.
That is true.
And I have the feeling that with you, you were in a way, or maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I heard. My fantasy is that you were better prepared for that kind of way because of what happened before in your life.
I think so. I think so. So again, when you look back at your life, things are sometimes clearer than they actually are, and sometimes dimmer than they are actually are. But I do know, just in that environment, to the question you asked, there were a number of things that were happening at the same time, and those things formed a foundation for me to hopefully develop into a better individual. Because again, you're examining the evidence, even though maybe your motives all the time were not necessarily about learning, but about winning. But there was an aspect of my formation that was very much about listening to the less quote unquote marginalized in my society. And so the combination of those two things with time, I think, has led me to become somebody who really pauses to hear what other people are saying, even if I vehemently disagree with them, and at least remaining open to that.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is something I've heard before here on the podcast. That, um, yeah, many people might disagree on things and still get along. I mean, it's this is also how we learn from each other,
Yeah.
even if we feel different kind of things. So that is. And that is, for me, a very nice way of answering this question about how things really could get you, yeah, something that really has influenced you. Because both stories, for me, well, first of all, like I said earlier, they're connected, but they also prepare you really well for life later on in ways. So definitely something out there. And could you, before we jump to the next questions, could you say some more about how that still influenced you today? Could you give some examples if you care to share?
Yeah. So uh, specifically around specifically around just being open to different viewpoints, I really have come to value curiosity over judgment. And this is being open to the different perspectives. Again, even if I vehemently disagree with them, and I'm not perfect at this, but I think I do a pretty good job of saying, what are you offering? But I am also highly critical, and it means that I very rarely take things at first blush. I have to understand. In fact, if I don't have the time to make sense of what I'm being told, I'll have to put it or bracket it somewhere until I can really go in and unpack it, especially if that thing is something that I want to use or want to have be part of my thinking or approach or practice going forward. So somebody comes and says, for example, hey, this is a very great technique for facilitation. Let's just use that as a quick example.
Hmm.
If I don't have the space to really understand why it's a great technique, I will not adopt it until I have had the time to really understand what it's about, and when I go to use it or try to test it, what I can expect and what I don't expect. If it's something that doesn't really impact my day-to-day life, then I really don't care about it. So that's that. And then I think when it comes to uh, the females that have been in my life, I think I've just always since then been a champion for them in the workplace as best I can, making sure that they're treated equally. We see in our workplaces a lot when a guy has a strong opinion, we say that person is assertive. But when a gal has a strong opinion, all of a sudden she's aggressive. And we begin to use different labels for essentially the same behavior because it's different genders, if I to phrase it that way. And so that's just been something for me in my career that I've always wanted to speak against, challenge, promote, support as best I can. And I've tried to do that as best I can.
Hmm. Yeah, the There was a meme at some point like, "What's the difference between assertive and aggressive?" And the answer was your gender, and that was really something that I recognize with yeah a lot of people
Yeah.
around me. That somehow things are not accepted from the women around us that are way more accepted from men at the level that they shouldn't be accepted at men, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, um, I recognize a lot of that, and definitely when you've been around, and I of course I can't really compare because I wasn't with you, neither were you, but I've had some similar kind of things with growing up with yeah with having females around me, and then indeed having this kind of understanding. So yeah, I really can see how that can influence you. Let's move to that second question. If you
Sure.
had not been doing what you've been doing now, you have any idea what would have become of you?
I would be playing football professionally,
Hmm.
or I'd be a musician. One of the two.
That's already two different. Let's take the first, because musicians. A lot of people have been talking about musicians. I'm really also interested in that story. But let's talk about the professional sportsman. What were you destined at some point, or was that just a dream, or what? How was that?
It was more than a dream. It was, but I don't know that it was destined. I just
Mm.
came to a fork in the road, and decided not to pursue football like
And at
all the
what age did you have that for?
probably 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that. Just decided to pursue it, decided not to pursue it with all the energy in the world. I was pretty good as a kid. In fact, many of my friends still say to this day that if I had not done what I'm doing right now, they totally could have seen me playing professional. Like, would I have made it to the top leagues in the world? I don't know, but I'm just saying professionally, that's something I would have
But
done.
that means also, sorry, I'm interrupting, but that
Yeah,
means
that's
that
right.
at 16, you were already playing football at a pretty decent level, I
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah. I was playing in high school. I was playing for club teams. I was playing all over like my local region. And I was playing in tournaments, winning tournaments, and all those things. So uh,
And what position were you playing?
I
I
was a
don't know
mid.
anything about football, so you can tell me
Oh,
anything,
okay, okay.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
I was an attacking midfielder.
Hmm.
So the game is so fascinating how life is all process, in the sense that nothing stays the same. And I say this to people all the time. Like, when I was growing up and you were watching the game, and the roles and the positions people played at that time, and now when I watch the game, you know, it's still 11 people on the field. There's still a round ball that people are kicking, and you win by scoring more goals than the other team. But the game has evolved. The players and the positions and what people do are so different from when I was like coming up, and I'm not even that old. So then I began to think about the generations before me and what the game must have looked like then. But I just say that to say, like, the position I played in high school and on club teams and things like that, that position really has like evolved to something very different in the modern game, in the way it's
Mm.
played today. So that's
And
also very interesting.
what's different about that?
When I was when I was playing, there was a position that was called an attacking midfielder, and this was somebody who played out of the middle, but who was really about creating and who was really about scoring a lot of goals, and that was the person's role. In today's game, you have people who are creative but not really expected to score as much, or you just really don't have the creatives that you had back in the day when I was growing up, where there was always, everybody had a player on their team who you would call the very creative player, who could dribble
Hmm.
past people. That archetype or persona has largely disappeared in the modern game. So it's
Is there still someone that you know that is doing that kind of playing of football?
uh, Let me see. So when I think about the club that I support the most, right, which is
Mhm.
Arsenal, the closest person to that would be a player they signed this summer, Eberechi Eze, who would be that. But even he's still different from that. He doesn't really play in that position. He sometimes plays in that position. Most often, he's playing from a flank or a win. So I'd actually have to really pause and think about that definitely to see if there's somebody who comes to mind who is really in that mold these days. That person is gone. When I was younger, Dennis Bergkamp was the prototypical player that I'm talking about. He played for Arsenal as well with Thierry Henry and that group back in the day. So I can go back there. Zinedine Zidane was probably another player of that mold back then as well. But that kind of player is, in my view, no longer that popular.
Hmm. All right. Yeah, but again, like I said, I don't know much about football, so I can't. The only thing is where I'm living. I said Ghent, but Drongen. This is the hometown of Kevin De Bruyne, which is
Yeah.
who grew up in and he played in well in both the local school and of course the local clubs here. So, and from the little that I understand, he is doing something similar because he is in the midfield and he's doing some attacking, but I don't know enough about the game to know if that's exactly what he's doing in the same way as you're describing.
Yeah,
Um,
so he's a representation of what the position has sort of evolved into, and he's actually a very different creative as well. So great player, wonderful player to watch, very good passer of the ball, scores goals, reads the field, and still yet very different from maybe a Maradona, who was another player of that type that I was
hmm.
talking about before. So there's some differences there. But the game has evolved, and that's
Well,
what happens in life. Nothing stays the same. There's always an evolution. That's just what happens.
yeah, because also, of course, the people today are different than the people before. And even if they would be the same people playing, they would still not be playing. They would have evolved as well.
Yeah,
I would assume that's the nice thing. That's
it's a
for me
great thing.
one
Yeah.
one of the things that indeed this is it's interesting when you think about um, agile teams. In a lot of cases we say, well, let's try to stick to 7 plus minus 2 people, and in football you have 11 people on the field that have to collaborate, that have to fight, whatever that means, against another party of 20 of 11 people. But actually there is, I don't know, what is it, 5 to 7 people who are on the bench, so the
Yeah,
group of people is even bigger than just 11
yeah,
people. You still
yeah.
have to create a team as a trainer. You have to, of a coach, you have to work with pretty large group to create a team out of that. And is that something when you were at that age of 16, when you were playing, did you feel this the sense of belonging to a team as really a team, like you work today with teams, or is that different for you?
It's different. It's different. There's some commonalities across it, I would say. So when you spend a lot of time with people pursuing a certain goal or shared goal, actually, it's very hard to not develop bonds and relationships with those people. So
Hmm.
that I think has been consistent. But the expectations when you play for a professional sports team or a sports team in general, when they're and to use the point you raise, and the objective is to defeat the competition,
Mhm.
literally defeat the competition, then your motives, your incentives, the things are different. You're also competing against your teammates. Like if you want to start, you have to train better than everybody else. You have to go into the games and you have to make an impact. You can't make mistakes because if you do, you're going to be put on the bench and somebody's going to replace you. On our agile teams, that level of competition necessarily doesn't exist. You know, you're not competing for a spot per se. There's not really somebody substituting people or replacing people. Yes, there's self-organization on the football field because you're trying to decide real time what to do. but there's someone on the sidelines often yelling instructions. So it's this hybrid of being led from the outside by the coach who is saying, do this, pass the ball, whatever, and then the team figuring it out while they're playing. And you could argue that in some agile team settings, that's also true. You have may have a manager who is giving instructions of some sort while the team's trying to figure things out. So there are some similarities and dissimilarities for sure. But the biggest difference I would say is in the sports situation, you're trying to defeat the opposition, and that creates a whole set of expectations that you have to live up to as an individual and as a group. Whereas on an agile team, yes, there is the competition that you're trying to defeat, but they're out there, so to speak. You're not engaged in hand-to-hand combat with them. You're trying to maybe get product to the market quicker than they are.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because indeed in a sports team, well, you want to become better as a team in
Yeah.
a way, and in that sense, you're competing with yourself because with your whole team, you want to become better. But in the end, in a match, in a game, uh, eh, you only have to be better, and you don't even have to be better. You have to score more than the opposite
Yes.
party,
Right.
and
Right.
it could be that you have an off day, whatever, and you just score two lucky goals, whatever. It could be that your competitor was really bad when you were bad as well. There could be all kind of dynamics, but the end, 1 week after that, the only thing that people care was it who scored more goals than the other party.
That's right.
And so that's a whole different dynamic because you could be good and still not scoring. You could be on your top game, but yeah, if a local club, a local Belgian club plays against Arsenal, well, yeah, that could be a problem if they're not at the same level, even if they played their very best game in years. If that's yeah, if that's not at the same level as a large international team, well, yeah, then it will be hard. And again, you can still have luck and for whatever reason still win at something that is unforeseen in a way.
That's right. And we see it happen. We see it happen.
Yeah, and it's well, yeah, it's and it's interesting because I said local club, and then I realized that the women, the Belgian women, there was a Belgium local team, a women team that played against Arsenal last week, where some friends of my children
Yo,
played in the
that's right. In the women's uh, Champions League, that is
exactly.
right. I actually watched that game. Yes.
Yeah, it was yeah. I know that my son was there, and he went basically with 30 friends. He went go watch a friend that is playing with them because for them it's like, wow, okay, you played international, and for the first time in Belgium, a women football match was sold out
Mhm.
because they played Arsenal, and
Yeah.
that was like yeah, it was a big event for these, and they really played well at their level.
Yeah.
But Arsenal, the women team of Arsenal, I think last year they won that
They won Champions League.
the
Yep.
Champions League. So
Mhm.
that's a whole different level than a team that comes to play that Women's Champions League for the very first time.
That's right.
And so that is really interesting to see at that level how people are playing and how things are working out. So we focused very much on that one possible career, but you had another possible career. Let's talk a little bit about that. What
I
you
think
you could
a
have
lot
been a
of people say
musician?
that. Yeah, a lot of people say they would have been a musician, right? So it's a common thing. I like music. I play the piano, play a couple of genres. I sing as well. So that's it. Everybody believes that they might have been a musician. Maybe,
Hmm.
maybe not. So that it's
And
not a
and
very
so you stopped your football career, whatever stopping means, at 16. Was that also the moment that you were interested in music? Was that playing a part of it, or was that already
No, they were
before?
completely unrelated. I grew up with
Right?
music in my household the entire time. Music was just a staple of our life, and so at an early age, up even while I was playing, like music was a part of what I did. And then after, basically did not commit to doing anything professionally. Music was still always there, and it was just something I've always done, something I've been interested in, something I've paid attention to. And so this is why I offer it as maybe something else I would have done if I didn't go into technology full
Mhm.
time.
And what kind of music was interested in? Did you ever perform concerts or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done, even now. I still play occasionally. I'll do a thing. I didn't really commit to well, let me say, there are genres I did not commit to, is probably the best way. But soul, pop, R&B, uh, play a little jazz. So I didn't commit to any one of those completely, but I can find my way around in those particular areas. I do love playing classical music. It requires a lot of commitment though, so I don't think I would have been a classical musician because it does
Were you
require
trained in a way
n-
on music, or is it just
uh,
by growing up and having music around that you kind of
both,
naturally?
both, both.
Mm,
Even till now, I still take piano lessons with uh, a pretty good advanced piano teacher. So it's just something that's always been part of my life, something I've always paid attention to.
mhm. I can, yeah. It's really interesting to see, and like you say, there's many people. There's actually quite a few people on the show that had some kind of musical career, and depending on the definition of what's a career, like when you say if you still occasionally play, that could be considered for some a career or not a career. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter if there is money or not involved. Um,
yeah,
but what I'm hearing is that just like sports was important when you were young, music was also a lot around the house, and you had a lot, and still today it plays a role. Um, is that is that in a way involved in your current life, in how you work? Were there things that you learned from music on how you work with people?
so music is creative. Music is understanding that sometimes the way you plan for the song to come out or even play is not the way it ends up. There's a lot of riffing, there's a lot of improvisation that you do with music. I see this a lot in the workplace. And music can be uncertain. So it's interesting, like if you listen to a lot of music, you can begin to predict what's going to follow, what's going to come next, like just as a way of patterns. And you can see patterns in the workplace based on your experience. But it's always very cool when a musician like surprises you by putting something that your mind was not predicting. The mind, we're predictive machines. We're always anticipating what's coming next. And so music often reminds me, this is a theme, I guess, to remain curious and to be just open to surprise and what's going to come. The other thing about music, and I say this with my teams and in organizations, is if you want to be a good musician, you have to pay attention to the fundamentals. You have to, like in the case of a pianist, you have to like do your scales and do your arpeggios and kind of go through your chords. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are, those exercises, those fundamentals are so key and essential to maintaining a high level of performance. So when you think about it in a team or workplace setting, it's the fundamentals again. What do we need to be good at? And let's excel at those things because they provide a foundation for which everything else gets built on top of. You can learn how to play a piece with very poor fingering. You can make it work, but it will really impact your ability to play that piece to the best of your ability, and it will impact potentially the quality of the piece as well. So
Yeah,
where there's an opportunity to do things well, do them well.
and I love how you stress that, because if you look at musicians, professional musicians, they spend an enormous amount of time practicing and learning, first on their own, on their instrument, then as a band playing together.
Yeah.
And even the big ones that are playing arenas and whatever, they still practice from time to time. Okay, if you play a show night after night after night, yeah, the last day's show is a practice for today's show, in a way. But still, if they go on a new tour, I heard a story about the Edge from U2 that asked one of his roadies to buy one of his old CDs because he couldn't remember anymore how to play a certain song. So he really needed to re-listen and like, how did I do it? Because yeah, that's a song I haven't played in what, an over a couple of years. And so yeah, I need to practice it again. I need to learn it again. And that is something that I think we don't always see in a lot of other practitioning. I mean, well, I've invented together with Tuana a coach retreat for the exact this reason. Let's have people practicing coaching exercises and whatever, because it is a skill.
Yeah.
And same with coding, what Corey Haynes did with Code Retreat. It's the same thing. Let's practice coding, because most developers, let's face it, most of their code is production code, like right away.
It
It
is.
might be released in 2 years because of whatever slow release plan, but it still is code that you've
Yeah.
written today that will go
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
And we're musicians, they play, they retry, like you say, we have to play the scales. I have a friend musician that, I think the first 2 or 3 years when I visited him, almost every time when he was at home, he was, this is like 30 years ago, MTV was playing and he was just on his guitar playing along with all the songs. It didn't matter if he liked the songs or didn't like the songs.
Yeah.
He just wanted to practice his ear, practice his yeah, his fingers to replay whatever was playing on.
Yeah.
I think that's so crucial. And when you talk about how this influenced with your teams, is there a way that you encourage teams to practice?
Yeah, I talk about it all the time, or as maybe not all the time, but I try to talk about it quite a bit. And I tell people whatever the skill is that are essential to the job that you're doing, you have to find ways of practicing it. You know, you talked about code katas and going to code retreats and taking part in that, or hey, I want to do a facilitation at home and let me see how the facilitation potentially goes, or even in the workplace, this notion of a dry run. So let me walk through this presentation a couple of times, not for the purposes of selling the presentation, which happens a lot in organizations. You have to sell it to this person. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about going through something so that people can give you feedback and you can work on it and get better at it. We only get better at things by repeated practice. This we know for a fact. And so this is it. I think the interesting things about our workplaces versus whether it's sports or whether it's music is in those sports and music, there's a performance for an external audience, and you're going to be judged and assessed on the quality of that performance. The art that you're doing or the game that you're playing is the object that people are going to assess and evaluate. In our work, the evaluation is really, is the customer going to buy the product you're trying to sell? And as a result, that often hides the need for attention to the craft itself. And this is why we tend to devalue paying attention to our craft and really doubling down on getting better at the craft, because no one really assesses the craft in itself. You'd really have to have a culture where that was encouraged and people really cared about how well do we do the craft. You get that sort of for free in sports and music, because if you have a bad performance, like, people will let you know immediately. Not always the case in developing software and other things like that. and just any all these disciplines, because we're talking about developing software and products, but this is true like in marketing. It's true in many other fields of work.
Hmm. Yeah, that's that is true. We're focusing here on some parts, but it's true in many
Yeah.
parts. And actually, it kind of waves directly into that next question about challenges. What do you consider at this point your biggest challenge, at least the biggest one that you want to share openly on the internet, and why is that a
Yeah,
good thing
yeah,
for you?
yeah. Need to be careful before I expose too much. So, this question is, what is your biggest challenge, and why is it a good thing for you? So, I think my biggest is always interesting, right? So, a big challenge I have. Let me reframe it that way, because I don't know if this is biggest or not. But and others might watch this and disagree and say, no, he has much bigger challenges than the one he's about to share. That's also possible. But I think a big challenge that I can often have is I'm a worst case scenario kind of person by default.
Hmm.
Like, and what this means is that I quickly go to the when something happens or there's a gap, I can quickly go to, hey, the worst possible reason why this it has happened. Like somebody hasn't trivial example, somebody hasn't called me back. They're upset with
Hmm.
me. Right. There are a whole bunch of other reasons why they may have not called me back. They may be busy, they might have missed the call. But for me, it's always like, what did I do wrong?
But-
And so
and
this,
if I can interrupt, that
yeah.
still is not the worst case. The worst case could be they're dead. Like so, there is a
Right. So
limit to your
so
worst. If I,
so it's interesting that you went there, because that's exactly where I was going to go. So
Mm,
you can see, like, for me it's about me. It's not
mm,
necessarily even about them, like what
mm.
might have happened with them. And so
It's about the
pausing.
interaction between the two of you, and they don't like me anymore. I screwed up, and something like that.
Potentially, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
potentially, and it's very rarely the case, right? It's all of it's like the things we learn about how many of us think about the worst things that can happen to us, but the probability that those things are going to happen to us are pretty slim. But
Hmm.
the maybe the reason why it is a good thing is it causes me to reflect. It causes me to be a bit more intentional, but it also causes me at times to pause, like you just did right there, and say, why am I focused on myself in this situation?
Hmm.
Are they okay? Is something wrong with them? What's the case? And suspend my judgment in that moment, and be curious, and just see what the universe will share with me. So I think that that's something I often have to just guard against, which is to not overthink the situation, not to quickly jump to conclusions per se when things go wrong. I don't do this necessarily when things go right, but it's when things go wrong. And I often have admiration for people who are almost like ducks with water that can just flow off their back after almost anything happens.
Hmm.
So that for me is something that I continue to work on. Everybody's working on something, but that for me is something that I continue to work on, and it keeps me, I think, humble and grounded as well. So
Yeah, I was
that's
about to say because, well, if you just look at for the people who are here, they don't know, but when we started off, we had some technical problems, and I think both of us we were looking like it's on my side, and in the
yeah,
end, it was on both sides.
yeah,
But I think it's so much easier to think it's on your side. You have to figure it out, and I don't look at my side, and it's actually much more productive to think, hey, I screwed something up. There is some because then for me it gives me more power. I can do something about it. If I
yeah,
blame it on another person, my ego might feel better, but in the end, the situation will not improve.
yeah,
And if you look at, of course, I can understand that if you always look at yourself, it might hurt your ego, and it might not. Yeah, it might be getting depressed if that happens too much. But at the same time, it gives. I would say it gives you also much more control to check if you can influence the situation in better ways.
Yeah, that is true. So locus of control is a very interesting thing because, like everything in life, we have to hold these things in delicate balance. If you take on the responsibility for everything that goes wrong being as a result of something you did, ultimately that can become overwhelming as well. And so I have that tendency. There are other people who have the exact opposite tendency, like you said, which is when things go
Mm,
wrong, or when there's a gap, let me put it that way, it's all about the other person, and there are challenges with that as well. So for me, it's finding that right balance, because you can go one way or the other too often if you're not careful. And it
right.
can lead to like overthinking, overanalyzing, going through the same thing over and over again when you don't need to. And so that's me. Everyone's got their thing, and for me, that's one of the things that I continue to work on. And
Until
like I
you
said,
have another challenge, I would say.
pardon me.
Until you find another challenge that is more bigger
Well, I
or
have other challenges. I just don't know if they're internet appropriate.
well, yeah, that is, well, one of the things that I keep saying is that the feel for this conversation should feel like the two of us are sitting in the bar, but indeed, let's keep some things for the bar, some of the challenges, and this is indeed that kind of thing where
Yeah,
we do share learning, and I'm very happy is maybe the wrong word, because it's always, yeah, hard sometimes to talk about challenges, but I'm glad that in a way that you dare to share this kind of thing, because so many people are struggling with that. um, I think so many people, when something happens, like, what did I do wrong, what's happening, and it's tempting to basically hit on our own head and think, oh, I'm such a loser, whatever, and not go there, and still at the same time stay humble and not just go to the complete opposite side and like it's all their fault. So that finding that balance, I think it's for many people really, really hard. And so thank you for sharing, because it is an important one.
I appreciate
uh,
it. Thank you.
it's, yeah, for me, I think it's really important that we can go there, because what I've noticed also, with a lot of people here on the show, is that, okay, um, if you would go back to people when they're 20 and you look at people that are a little bit older, it always looks like, oh, these people have it all together and everything's fine. And then the older I get, at least I notice, like, oh, actually these people were struggling as well, and I might not have seen it, and maybe at that time it was not a world where people felt safe enough to share. And I have the feeling we have, with much more people, feeling like, hey, we can share that some of that stuff is yeah, we're all still struggling with something at some kind of level. So that, yeah, I think
Life
that's
is constant. Yeah, life is a constant struggle. There's no escaping that. Like the only people who don't have any struggles are people who are dead. For the rest of us, it is a constant struggle. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
I love it. Yeah, I was thinking you would say they were lying, but then you make it even like, yeah, they're dead. I don't. That
Yeah,
it's what was it? I heard once, yeah, some kind of meme or some kind of saying that, it was about, when you're dead, it's really hard for the people around you. It's not hard for you because you don't know it anymore. It's
yeah,
hard. The struggle is for the people around you,
yeah.
and I think that is so true, that these people don't struggle anymore. And indeed, well, unfortunately, I've known some people who died at the end of their life because they had, yeah, very big illnesses, and had a really hard time. And although I'm sad that they're gone, at the same time I can also feel like, for some of these, like, okay, maybe that was the right time, because things could have gotten much worse and would have been almost impossible to bear for
That's
these
right.
people. And like you say, they don't struggle anymore, and so
Right.
that might be better. And of course, this is not easy to say or to even feel and think. But yeah, at some point, it the struggle is over, and that might be better. And in that way, it's also good that we struggle because it shows us that we're alive
Right,
in a way.
right, right,
It's
right. Like that the struggle reminds us that we still exist.
and
Yeah,
well, and it also shows well for me you can't have tops if you don't have downs. I mean, if it would always be a top, that would feel flat, and I can imagine that would become boring at some point as well,
yeah.
so it wouldn't become so in a way the negative parts make us feel alive, make us think again, okay, maybe I should do something better, because okay, it might not been completely my fault that X or Y doesn't talk to me anymore. Still, I could have been nicer to that person. I could have whatever. So that could have helped me in a way.
Yeah. Yes.
Really wonderful ideas and wonderful ways of thinking. Let's move to that next question. What drives you? And yeah, I think we already talked a little bit about some of these things, but is there something where you, because you're clearly a passionate person, you talked also about the two other possible careers are also passionate careers. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know any big football players, or I don't know any big musicians, but they're always very passionate people. And I have the feeling with you also with your book, with your podcast, that you have a real big passion.
Yeah. So we talked about it on the onset. I mean, one can have multiple passions, I think, in life. But if I were to get a little meta here, I like thinking about things as being, what am I going to do with the dash? And what I mean by that is, there's a day you show up and there's a day you're gone, and on your tombstone it will say, like, whatever it says from 19 whatever it says to who knows, 2020, whatever. But it's the dash that sits in between those two dates. And for me, it's in the time that I have here, or as we're talking about, what's the impact, positive impact I can make on those around me. And for me, my passion, at least professionally, is the workplace. Like, how can we make our
Mm,
workplaces just better places? When we think about our vision for humanity, does our vision for humanity include thriving and flourishing and development and community and all of those things? And if it does include that, and you think about how much time we spend in the workplace, then we need to be having real conversations about how can our vision, how can our organizations, our companies contribute or participate in that vision. So that's
mm,
what drives me at a very tactical level with my teams daily, more broadly with books and podcasts and speaking opportunities and my engagement in social media and all of that. That's what I'm about. So anybody can help think differently so that they show up differently to work, and use maybe their executive power, for example, to change things in the system so it's a better system for people in the organization, or even employees who may not have the organizational power and authority, but have their own personal power and authority and can really change the way they show up to work and potentially have a different new set of experiences in the workplace. That's, at least right now as we're speaking, that's what fuels me. That's what gets me going each and every day.
mhm. Yeah, I can relate to that. I can definitely see that is where a lot of the passion and a lot of the drive with you is. And do you have any idea where that comes from? Was Little App already in a way thinking about that?
I don't think so. Little Eb wanted to become a medical doctor. That's what Little Eb wanted to do. And
Oh, that's
through
even a third profession that I haven't heard about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was the profession I think a lot of people thought I was going to do. And we're socially shaped. So when you're born and you show up into this world, you don't bring yourself here, but you find yourself here, and then you find people who were here before you. and they transmit messages to you, and you receive a lot of those messages potentially. And in my case, the message was, you've demonstrated that, you might make a good medical doctor. I don't know how people decide that when you're 4, 5, or 6 years old, but hey. And so, you hear this message, and then that's the story that inhabits you. And it's the story you begin to tell yourself, I'm going to be a medical doctor. But anyway, I didn't become a medical doctor. Things happened in life. I took a different path and went into technology. But I will say that instead of like quote unquote healing human beings or human organizations, maybe it's the healing of like the human body, excuse me. Maybe it's healing human organizations. That's where my doctoring is coming into play, and what can we do to make our orgs, our workplaces healthier and more resilient, and all those particular things. So that's potentially where it came from, uh, as I think about it.
Yeah, kind of makes sense in a way, and yeah, I keep thinking back about these messages when you're a young child, or when everybody's young child. Yeah, as a parent also, what is the messages that we bring? I don't want to, yeah, put pressure on my children to say you have to become this or that. At the same time, when they're interested, I also want to cherish their interest. I'm actually learning a lot by just listening at their interest, like, hey, that's an interesting thing, even if my kids might think that that might not interest me, but I'm actually learning a lot by these interesting. um, and but it's interesting to think about how that influences them, and like you say, you might not have become a doctor, but it's still in a way these messages and the conversations that happened there influenced you in a way how you looked at things. So that's really is nice to see.
Yeah.
Let's move to that, in that sense, that related thing, like, what's then your biggest achievement so far? What's the thing that you're, and actually when I talk about that, this is talking about being proud. Basically, this is your moment to brag and to be really proud of something. Is that
Well,
easy for you,
brag,
Ab, to brag?
yeah. So talking about messages, we didn't brag when I was growing up. So bragging is very difficult for me.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe that's another big challenge that I have. Some people would say that. Some people have given me feedback that I don't talk about myself enough in the workplace, but it doesn't come natural to me. It doesn't feel authentic yet. Maybe it will with time. So
and
my biggest,
and you quickly said, as in a way, that this was also a message that was passed on to you when you were little, right?
yeah, 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 I did. I
It
did.
wasn't,
So
you somehow heard as a young app, like, bragging is not good in a way. Is that?
probably not that. Maybe, probably not that. But more, sometimes messages are what people overtly say, but more often messages are what you observe those around you do and how they respond in moments. So,
Mhm.
in moments when people have an opportunity to brag but don't brag, there's a message in that which says, like, we don't brag. It doesn't even have to be overt. So, neither of my parents did a lot of bragging. My dad was extremely, extremely humble man, and I really appreciated him for that. And so for me, those were things that I just picked up as a kid, and continue to go with today. But it's important to speak to the things you have done, and I think that matters as well. When you've accomplished things, there's no reason to not say you have accomplished things. So for me, again, this word biggest is always an interesting word to use, but something I'm very, very proud of is I wrote a book. That's something I
Mhm.
had really wanted to do probably from
And
the time
this
I
is the
turned.
book that we're talking about, right?
It is, right. So from the time I became a young adult, I wanted to write a book, and I'm working on my second book right now. So being an author is probably one of the proudest things
Mhm.
for me that I've done. Going back to school in my 40s, and getting a doctorate in strategic leadership is something that I'm also pretty proud of while working full time. Not
And
not easy.
and I mean, yeah, that's the
And
whole
having
thing.
a family and all
A
of that. Yeah.
family, and yeah, the keep the life going on, and yeah, that's wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my father went back to university probably around the same age. I don't know exactly how old he was, but when I was 16 at that time, and I know the investment that he did to do all of that. That yeah, that just takes a lot of time to do that. At the moment that basically yeah, your family also needs you, and yeah, that and the work, the money, you still, I guess most people still need money, so you have to
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
working. So
Yeah.
it's not some, most people can just say, okay, I'll pause my career for a year for studying or for writing a book. That's well, that's only for the happy few, I would say. So yeah, that's definitely something that I think is both the book and the studying is a great accomplishment.
Yeah,
Um,
but because I'm a people person, one of the things that I feel very good about is the number of people I've been able to mentor, the number of people I've been able to support, the number of people I've been able to open a door for in the agile space and give them the opportunity to
mm,
take on roles, whether it's as agile coaches or scrum masters or engineering managers or product people. These are things that I ultimately feel good about because that's what's life's about. Uh, we re, you accumulate with receiving, but you really experience life through giving. And so being able to give and help other people is just something I'm excited. I'm excited when people ping me and tell me what they're doing, or I see somebody that was trying to become a scrum master, for example, you helped, and all of a sudden they're coaching or they've started their own company and providing these kinds of services. So those things
and is
make me feel
this
pretty good as well.
is this happening regularly, that people come back to you and say, hey, thank you very much because now I'm this or that?
Regularly, probably. If regularly is yearly, I have one or two or three people say stuff, then yes, I'd
Well,
answer
there is
that.
a regular, there is
There is
a,
a
yeah.
regular I don't
uh,
expect people to come, every month. That's
mm,
just not the way the world works.
mhm.
But, people remember, and I'm always appreciative for people remembering.
Yeah, I'm asking because I've noticed, and maybe it's because I'm older, that yeah, it's something that I find much more important to keep doing, both myself and to hear, because it's yeah, somehow we're all standing on the shoulders of others, and we don't always tell people. I'm trying to do that as much as possible these days, but I'm pretty sure that I could have done way more when I was younger. And like you say, it doesn't have to happen every week or every month, but if it happens a couple of times in the year, that's always nice to hear these kind of
It
remarks
is.
and these
It
kind of
is.
things.
It is.
It also, well, for me at least, it helps me to think back, like, because sometimes I think like, oh, was that a good advice, or was that a good idea? And then a couple of months later, you hear like, hey, we did this and that, and then okay, that's so. Yeah, okay, people did something with the ideas, and sometimes it's like, well, we tried, it didn't work. That's fine. I've learned something as well. I'm actually happy if they tell me that they didn't do anything with it. It's feedback like
Yeah.
anything else. So
Yeah.
that's really is I think. Okay, let's move to that next question about personal agility. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Structure.
Structure.
I think structure is so important. I think sometimes people think agility simply means let's just wing it. But I found
Mm.
that agility comes from having a level of structure that enables quick decision making. It enables even structure to the day. And so for me, it's having a degree of structure that can enable me to move quickly, to make decisions, to decide what's more important as I'm trying to choose between things I need to work on. So for me, it's all about having a level of structure to
And
enable ability.
when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking back about the career as a football player. again, I don't know much about sport, but I do know that they sometimes have, okay, we'll play in that way or that way. They have some kind of structure that they train on. But of course, in the match, in the game, things are moving in all kind of directions. But the better you're prepared in a way, I think the easier you can flex indeed and have that agility to adjust to a certain situation. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or is it something else?
No, it is that kind of thing. Even in the chaos of playing a sport, you know there is underlying structure. I know that
Uh,
when I run into that space because the ball is there, somebody's going to cover that particular
uh,
area because I'm gone. There's a level of structure underneath the chaos that's unfolding as we play the game. And I think this is also true in the workplace, like basic things like clear as clear as you can be on who's responsible for what, or how do we make decisions, or when this kind of work comes in, what is it balanced against, or at a very personal level, here are the three projects I'm working on, but which one is most important to the company, so that I know if I'm going to make trade-off decisions, it's very clear to me where I need to make those decisions. So that kind of
and
structure
that your
enables
trade-off,
me.
I would add to that, I'm trying to guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would add to that is if 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 I know the right ways for the trade-offs, I will make the same trade-offs as my colleagues, and our trade-offs won't go in opposite
Yeah,
directions,
it
because
will. Yeah,
that's where the structure comes in for me. Is that what
yes.
you mean?
It is. It is. It is. That's those are great examples. And I'm looking at this as a personal tip, but if you think about it from a team perspective, that's how you scale it in that situation. We
Mm,
see this in our personal lives. If you have some structure around the way things go, then it makes it easier to move. At least for me, in my home, we have structure around my kids go to school. They're all still with us at this particular time. They're all still at home, and so we could wake up every morning and it be an adventure on what's going to happen that day. We know the day never unfolds perfectly. There are always twists and turns, but having some structure about this is what we're going to eat today, this is when everybody needs to be down, this is when we're going to leave, that allows us to move with agility and move from thing to thing. And absorb some of the unexpected that might happen in the day. And this is, so it works at a personal level, it works at a group level as well. So that's why for me, structure is one of the things I always talk to about people. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming amount of structure or very heavy structure, but it's structure that enables your ability to move and move quickly and change direction when you need to.
mhm. Yeah, I really like that because indeed, well, if I look back, well, the last couple of years, basically since Corona, and I think even before, I started having some kind of routine things with my partner. I wouldn't call them dailies because, of course, if I would start calling work things in my personal life, I don't think it would fly. But basically, it's that it's checking in on a daily basis, like how was your day, how what are the challenges for tomorrow, and even on a weekly basis, like, okay, how was our week? We don't call them retrospective, but basically that's it. Let's look
It
back at
is.
our last
Yeah.
week and let's see how could we make things better. And it could go to all kind of things. It could go about work, it could go about how we deal with the children, how some things happen in our relationship or with friends or with parents or whatever. But that's the kind, and that I've noticed that the moment that we drop these structures, yeah, it's harder when the chaos hits. And again, if everything's fine and we don't always need it, but when there is chaos at such a moment, then it's a lot harder, and that structure really helps us.
Yeah.
So I'm really, for me, it's a really nice example of how structure can help at personal level, at team level, at
Yeah.
all kind of levels. That's
Yes.
really wonderful.
Yeah.
Great tip for giving for people.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Let's move to remote working. What have you learned about remote working?
Boy, that people love it. A
Hmm.
lot of people love remote working. Some people don't, for sure.
And
But
you
maybe
are, for you, do you love remote working?
now love is a very strong word for me. I like the flexibility. Love. I like to be around people. I think that that's important. And so this is where, for me, one of the things I've learned about remote working is proximity is not the same as presence. So
Hmm.
people just because people occupy the same space doesn't mean they're necessarily there with each other. Proximity can enable presence, but it doesn't guarantee it. So what we've
Right.
learned is that there's some people who, even with remote working, their teams, I've observed, even with remote working, have a strong team identity. And the teams changed. Everyone's in different places, but they do the things virtually that really create and help them to maintain and foster that connectedness, that presence with each other. Whereas there are teams who come back to the office who've not spent the time and energy to really build presence among themselves. So they sit in the same area when they come into the office, but haven't necessarily done the work to really become a real team again. And so people often just take for granted that because we're in the same area, we're going to experience this presence among ourselves. Or conversely, because we're not physically located, we cannot develop presence. And uh, proximity doesn't necessarily necessitate that one way or the other. That's maybe one of the biggest lessons I've learned through this remote work experience that many of us are undergoing. Now, how long remote work is going to last, I have real open questions about that, because I do think that a lot of the prevailing paradigms that we have in the modern day workplace are paradigms of control. And so I'm voting, I'm not voting, I am betting is the word, that we are going to move more and more away from remote work and back to being in the office more and more days of the week. Some people will suggest that I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see that not being the case, except there's a major shift in the prevailing paradigm that many senior leaders hold, because for them, physically seeing people is so important.
It's yeah, and but I love the way you phrase it because it's for them maybe more
Yeah,
than for the
yeah, yeah,
people around them.
yes,
And like you say, well, for me, this conversation is a nice example how we're not physically present, we're miles apart, we are time zones apart, and at the same time, I feel connected one way or another.
yeah,
It would be a completely different conversation if you would be in the room here. Um, but I'm not sure. Well, the investment would also be a lot harder. One of us would, or both of us, we would need to move
yeah,
to invest time and energy and money to be together. And would that then be so much better conversation compared to the investment? I'm not sure. And that is why for me it's interesting. I can do now on one day multiple of these good conversations. Uh, Both of us we can go back to our families or work or whatever we want to do, and that allows us some kind of thing. Um, then again, I also noticed that the example I like to give is when I go to a conference and I have an argument with my partner just before I leave. I now have learned that it's impossible to repair while I'm away. That just doesn't work. If everything goes fine before I leave, the conversations we have while we're apart, they're pretty okay to good. But if something is bad, and it doesn't have to be big issue, but if something's bad, it's almost impossible for us to repair it. And this is now I'm talking about relation that is going 30 years strong. So it's not just a person we barely know, it's a person with who I live for a very long time. And still it's hard to impossible to repair some of the things.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, there is things that proximity help and being physical
Yes.
together.
Yeah,
help
yeah,
in so
yeah.
many different ways.
For
So yeah,
sure, for
that's
sure, for sure. We should not throw out throw out proximity as mattering. It does matter, and this is why when you said love, I kind of said no. I don't wouldn't call it love. I like the
mm,
flexibility, but I do like being with people. I do like looking people in the eye and really seeing certain body language and certain things. You know, one of my big hypotheses around remote work that I've not been able to test is I do wonder how much we're losing in the form of the quality of interactions in group settings, not one-on-ones. And I do have my suspicions about one-on-ones, but even in group settings, because it's so easy to be distracted and doing other things when working online virtually. And maybe the loss is not enough to be meaningful, but I do wonder about that. So I often
mhm.
do wonder about that and what that looks like. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
like yeah, but the other thing is, of course, like well, we've been working so long together in an office, and we learn so much great practices. We have barely scratched the surface of working remotely. We haven't
Yeah,
learned anything of the practices that we need to do, and so if I hope that things could get better, but yeah, it doesn't mean that it will completely replace working physically together. There, I can definitely see that.
yeah.
That's for sure. I want to move to that next question about a book. What's a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
So I read a lot. I like to read books. I think for this I chose Freedom and Accountability at Work by
This is the
Kustabaum
book.
and Block. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Block has written a lot of books for leaders. I know people have read a number of his books, but this book's an interesting book because it just provokes thought around your relationship to the workplace at any level. And this
Mm,
idea that we're all like walking accountabilities and freedoms. Like the two Peters are really challenging people to reflect on how they're showing up in the workplace, what they're willingly giving up without any form of thought or reflection, and how people need to take more ownership of their experience as individuals and collectives in the workplace. Sometimes, you know, we're looking for permission to do the right thing when we should just do the right thing. Just do the right
right.
thing. Stop this moral evasion, as they call it, which is looking for somebody to give you permission to
Yeah,
do the
it's
right
it's
thing.
so sometimes, and this is the interesting thing is that in many cases, many companies, people know what is the right thing to do, and still somehow they are begging for permission to do it,
Yeah,
instead of just okay taking the ownership and doing it. I think a lot of us I immediately have some examples, but I'm not going to go into all of these kind of things. But I think most of us, we have examples where we see people not taking the responsibility and the accountability, because that's the word that they're using in the book, for the things that they know are perfectly okay, that their bosses, but somehow, I don't know, is it do you know where that could come from? Why people are not doing that? Do you have any idea?
yes. So, wow. I think this is largely learned behavior from even pre-work, and the work I'm doing in my latest book project talks about this. Like we are born thrust into this world, and as we discussed earlier, the world begins to tell us what we should do and what we should not do. We begin
Hmm.
to get blamed. Begin to say, don't speak up, and things like that. And then you go into the workplace, and then you see somebody maybe question a decision an executive made. And then next week, that person is no longer with the company or they don't get a promotion. And you learn very quickly that you are just to do as you're told and not say anything, regardless of even what the company might say, regardless of any posters in the hallway. You learn from what happens to others or yourself, how you should potentially show up. And so we ourselves teach ourselves these responses. We teach ourselves to look the other way. We teach ourselves that, protecting ourselves from discomfort is ultimately the way to go. We look at people who are advanced in the organization, and often, not all the time, but quite often, these are people who go along with the predominant narrative in the workplace and do all these things. And
Mm,
so it's a long way of saying to you, like, why do we, it's what we've been taught, is what we've absorbed, is what we've come to accept as the way to act. And until somebody pours cold water on us and says, here's another way to look at it, we all potentially just continue down that path.
because, and like you say, I want to stress it, and that might not, that's learned behavior. I fully agree with you, but it might be learned behavior not in this company, but
Oh
at
yeah,
home at another company.
that's right, that's right.
I
In
heard
life,
people.
in school, yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because school is, well, for me, I've seen, and I know that things have changed in schools, but I've seen a lot of schools where basically there is only two answers in school. It's right or wrong. And all the creativity that we need in workplace is different than sometimes what are in school. And so yeah, we might have been punished by rewards, how it's called, by going in a certain direction, or thinking we need to go. Because that's the interesting thing, is that I loved how you phrased it. I don't know the exact wording anymore, but you said something along the line like, okay, we think that that person is punished for it, but it might be not true. The person might not be there next week anymore, but that might have been an agreement that was made 6 months ago that we don't know because nobody talked about it. And so
That's right.
we make all kind of assumptions. It might be a decision that that person took himself or herself, like, okay, I don't want to do this kind of thing anymore. And because that person took that decision, felt much more freedom to speak up in the last couple of weeks and months. And now everybody thinks, oh, it's because of that freedom that this person is no longer there. It might actually be the opposite, but we don't know. And that's the learned behavior. Really
Yeah,
wonderful way of looking at these kind of things. It's I think it's really important in indeed. I have read a couple of books from Peter Block, the flawless consultancy, the stewardness, and the
stewardship. Yeah,
stewardship. That's the word, the
yeah,
book. But I haven't read this one, so it's something that really triggers me to probably put on my to read
yeah,
list,
yeah,
because it's that freedom, that how would I call it? Um, that tension between freedom and accountability. I think that's the word I was looking for. They collaborate, and they sometimes feel that they're interacting, for some people.
yeah, yeah. I think again, what the book has done for me, or what it did for me, I read it a while back, but I've offered it to other people. At a minimum, be aware of the choices you are making. At a
Mm.
minimum, and even if you don't like your choices, just be aware of the choices that you're making. And that's what the book challenges us to do. It challenges us to move from autopilot to really owning up to whatever choices we're making, whatever explanation or rationale we're giving to those choices. Let's own up to them as best we can, and then see what happens from there. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that, because for me that's also one of the reasons why I like to use a personal coach that can show me a mirror. Like, okay, Eve, I hear you say this, but yeah, did you look in a different way, and why did you take that decision? Is it just a rationalization? Is it, where did you learn to think that way? Because maybe that's not how other people think, or and that's understanding why we make decisions is so crucial in, yeah. And it doesn't mean that we should take a different decision, because that's not what I heard you say, but it's much more about, okay, understanding where it's coming from, to, in that sense, take the ownership of these kind of
Yeah.
I want to move to that next question already about, for me, one of the most interesting questions. What's a question you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
So part of the question I was going to offer was the one we actually sort of got to unintentionally when you asked me why do people do things, like people know the right thing to do potentially and yet don't do it. So that was something I was going to say, hey, let's explore that. So now that I'm back on the hot seat, what question do you think I should ask, and what's the answer? Uh, the future of work with AI. Let's if that's okay, let's ask a
Hmm.
question about that. And there's at least in the work we do, which is about product development. So there's been a lot of conversation about how with the Gen AI developers can do more quicker, you can do more research quicker and things like that, and the consequences of that. A lot of people see it as that this means jobs will go away and things like that will disappear. I think that is one potential outcome. I think another potential outcome, however, is that because we're doing significantly more work, and I'm not even, this is no commentary on whether it's the right work or the wrong work. It's just
Hmm.
more work in general. I think we're going to find out that we are going to need even potentially more coordination, more management of the work, more ways of staying on top of the chaos that we are generating because we can ultimately do more. Like companies are not very good at constraining themselves. They're not very good at saying, we're only going to do this. Like you look at every company, there's always debates about trade-offs and which is more important and what should we do versus not do. We're not good at managing our work in general. I do not see that problem going away anytime soon. In fact, I hypothesize that it's going to be worse with our ability to quickly create working software. So I think we've got some, I don't have any answers, but I think the world of work, at least in product development, is going to be changing here. And there's some real open questions about what does this mean for agile and all the things we talk about when it comes to getting work out the door. So
Hmm.
that's my initial thought on that particular topic.
And yeah, it's interesting because it's a topic that's been living, but it's actually, I think, only the second time that people on the show talk about AI in a way. Um, could you let's see, how can I make it an open question? Could you give an example on how it if influences your life today, in a way?
So the way it influences my life, well, part of my role where I work is about effective delivery of software solutions and helping make sure we're able to do that. And so we've been used to working in a certain way and expecting a certain amount of throughput. Again, this is no evaluation of the quality of what's being produced. This is just the amount of work being produced in the first place. And where this gets very interesting is if we're, or where we have to really have conversations is if we are able to, let's say, double or triple the amount of stuff we can produce hypothetically, how do you manage all that stuff? How do you educate your customers so that they can absorb all that stuff? They're used to absorbing stuff at a particular rate. Now you're producing
Mm,
stuff at a greater rate, a significant, like real shift kind of rate. How do you help them increase their capacity to absorb what you're giving them? And then the feedback loop, they might come back with a whole bunch of things and say, hey, this needs to be different. So I think we're going to be at an inflection point here very shortly where figuring out how to manage work at a greater scale is going to be questions. And does this create some tensions to the way we organize or the way we've talked a lot along for a long time about trying to have teams be as autonomous as they can be, but a lot of organizations struggle with that higher levels of autonomy. Does this put enough pressure on organizations where, in order to meet the new challenge or deal with the challenges of being able to deliver more, they take risks and open themselves up to organizing differently? Again, I don't have any answers to these, but these are things I'm contemplating as we go into this new world of delivering more, if I just put it that way, or the
Mm.
having the ability, the potential to deliver more.
Yeah, it's indeed one of the challenges that we will have with that. I think that's yeah, a really interesting yeah, challenge with no answer. I would say right now.
Yeah.
It's at this moment. It's yeah, we don't know where we'll end up with that. Okay, I want to move to already that last question. Who do you think I should ask next?
Who you should ask next. So my first suggestion, I believe, was Jen Pacelli. I think that that's the
I
way.
think that's her. Is that correct?
That is her.
And
That is
so
her.
why should I invite her?
Yeah. So her work in complexity and the things she shares, and I've only met her on LinkedIn and listened to one or two of her talks in the Complexity Lounge, are just very practical, down to earth ways of helping organizations address their challenges that they have. The AI conversation we just had a second ago, I'm actually curious to see what her thoughts would be on that. But this is why I think she would be a good guest for this. I found her work intriguing. I've also found her write-ups as well, like eye-opening and very encouraging around design, around complexity, about organizational changes and shifts, and helping groups move from a particular spot they are today to a different spot down the road. So she,
Mhm.
my number one suggestion.
All right. And I think you had a second suggestion, second name you wanted to invite as well.
Yeah, I believe my second suggestion was William
And I
Davis.
think that's William, if I'm correct.
That's William. William, I met on LinkedIn. Uh, I've actually had the opportunity of guest lecturing for him at the University of Florida as well. He's a seasoned uh, agile practitioner, seasoned program project manager as well. Uh, thinks has addressed challenges that I'm not sure are always talked about or addressed explicitly in a lot of agile conversations. So I think he brings a different perspective to the table around things like estimation, as an example,
Mm.
and the importance of estimation, or how to manage products across groups in a way that still gets the benefits of the agile approach, while maybe not creating too much discomfort for people. So I think he's also another interesting person to bring on.
Wow. That really wonderful to have two more names that in both cases I didn't know. So I'm really, yeah, that's for me one of the nice ways of doing this to get to know and be in contact with other people. Now, Ab, it's been a wonderful time to been talking to you. If people want to connect with you and learn more about you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
It is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm not on LinkedIn right now. I don't know when this recording will go live. I
This
take a
is the
break.
link, if I'm correct.
That is the link. I take a break every at the end of every year, do a little bit of a LinkedIn fast. So I'm doing that. I'll be back on LinkedIn early next. Actually, try to take a social media fast at the end of the year. But LinkedIn is the number one place, and then I am on Twitter with the handle EIKONNE. Same handle, I believe, on Blue Sky as well. And then you showed earlier my joy at work. blog.
And
That's another place you can reach me too if you'd want
and
to.
I think this is the
That's it.
YouTube channel you
That's
talked
right.
about.
That's my YouTube channel. Yeah.
So I didn't prepare Twitter because these days it's really, yeah, it's a strange place to be on Twitter,
I
I
am
would
not
say.
uberly active on Twitter. Neither am I uberly active or very active on Blue Sky. But if people go there, they will find me.
They might find
But
you.
I do most of my commenting on LinkedIn. So that's the best place.
Okay, if I, yeah, I hope to remember to also add Blue Sky at least the link for people that want to know to get connected there on yeah. Well, I will add to the show notes, I think. Well, it's been a wonderful for me evening for you, close to the afternoon, I would say,
Yes,
early
108
morning.
now. Yeah.
Really, I loved every minute. Yeah, time flew by. It's. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a blast joining you. Long overdue, I think, because you reached out a year or two ago, but life happened. I'm glad we're able to make this
This is
happen.
this is how things happen in, yeah, like you say, life
Yeah,
happens, and then I'm I'm still happy that we could make it and we could record this and I can put it live. So thank you
fantastic.
very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.